Today, I'm going to show you how to use layer masks in Photoshop. Hey guys, and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace, and you can find me on Phlearn.com, where we make learning Photoshop and photography fun. And today's episode, it's been a long time coming. I was looking back at our old episodes, and I realized after 4.5 years of making Photoshop tutorials, I haven't made an episode on how to use layer masks, which is one of the most basic things and one of the most important things you can learn in Photoshop. So today, we're going to show you the ins and outs of layer masks. Now, basically, what is a layer mask? It's a way to make a layer either visible or invisible. You can paint black to make it invisible or paint white to make it visible. And you can use these with regular layers, with adjustment layers. They're a non-destructive way to make part of your image appear or disappear. We got a bunch to get into. Let's go ahead and jump into Photoshop. Alright guys, so here's our image for today. We've got an awesome looking subject with all kinds of colors, and we're going to be cutting her out of the background. We're also going to be adding some nice dots and things like that to the image. So to start off with, let's go ahead and show you what a layer mask actually is and how to work with a layer mask. So we're going to create a new layer. So let's go ahead and click on our new layer icon. You can see we have layer 0, which is our background here, and layer 1, which is our new layer. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to grab our marquee tool. We're going to go to an elliptical marquee, and I'm going to hold the shift down and just make a circle just like that. Okay, so I'm on a new layer. We've got a selection active. Now, there's nothing inside of this selection. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill this with a color. So let's go to Edit and down to Fill. Okay, it's going to go ahead and fill this. You can choose to have it fill with a pattern, foreground, background color. We're just going to go to Color here, and then we can actually choose a color. So first we click on color, and then we can choose our color, and I can choose it here, from my actual color picker, or I can go over to my image, and I've got a little eyedropper now, okay? And let's click on this yellow. So we're gonna fill this circle with yellow. So hit OK there, fill with yellow, hit OK, and there we go. Controller Command D to deselect. All right, so now we have this really nice circle on a new layer filled with yellow. Okay, and you can see it's above my subject here. We can move it anywhere we want to. Okay, well, let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit and start to show you guys how layer masks actually work. So right now it's 100% visible. This area is on this layer. Now, let's say if we wanted part of this circle to disappear. Traditionally, you might think to use an eraser tool. So I'm going to use the eraser tool here. This is the destructive way of doing it, by the way, using an eraser tool. I prefer to use a layer mask because a layer mask is non-destructive. So again, eraser, destructive. Layer mask, non-destructive. Okay. So let's hit the eraser tool, and we're just going to erase part of this away and say, okay, cool, that's what I want it to look like. I don't want that area to be there. I want to see through part of my circle there, which is totally fine if that's exactly what you want and you never want to get anything back. But now, here's the problem. Let's say I want to get some of that back, right? I want some of this information back from that circle. Well, I've erased it away. There's really nothing I can do to get it back except for I can go back in my history. So for instance, if I go to Window and down to History, I can step backwards in time and I can go ahead and get that back. But let's say you did a bunch of other cool stuff in the meantime. You don't want to go and undo all your changes just to be able to get some of this back. So let's go ahead and step back into our time. So using the eraser tool, that's a destructive way of making part of your layer invisible. Now, what we're going to do is click on a layer mask. So you have a layer mask icon right down here. Okay, you can also go to Layer, okay, and right down here to Layer Mask, and we can go to Reveal All, which just creates a white layer mask. Okay, now here's the deal with layer masks. If they're white, it means the layer is going to be visible. If they're black, it means the layer is going to be invisible, okay? And you can use any type of selection tools and techniques you have to either fill parts of a layer mask with white or black. In this case, we're just going to use a simple brush tool. All right, so jumping back in, I'm going to hit B for the brush tool. Now, you can see my foreground color here is black. So as I paint over top of this circle, there we go. It's pretty similar to what we just saw with the eraser. Now, here's our layer. So we've got our layer. I'm clicked on the layer. You can see a little bounding box next to it here. Okay, and click on the layer mask. Now we've got the bounding box next to the layer mask. Okay, and you can see there's a little bit of black right here as well. So painting with my brush tool, if I paint black on my layer mask, it makes it go away. Now, as opposed to the eraser, all I have to do is paint white on my layer mask and I can get this back. So this is any point in time. So I'm here working on my image. 10 years later, I can open this up, and if I had painted black right there, I can just click on my layer mask and paint white right here on this layer. So that's the whole idea behind a layer mask. It allows you to make part of a layer visible and part of a layer invisible, and it's completely reversible. You can change this from visible to invisible at any point in time. So that's why it's non-destructive, because it doesn't actually destroy what's going on in your image, and you can make parts of the layer visible and invisible. All right, guys, so that's the basics. Now let's go ahead and jump in and show you a little bit more advanced ways to actually use layer masks. Okay, so we started off by just using our brush tool. We just painted some black on there. Now, let's say we wanted our entire layer to be either visible or invisible. Well, we can just fill this entire layer with either white or black. So I'm going to hit Shift-Delete, which is the keyboard shortcut for the fill dialog. Okay, and we can just say fill that with black. And again, it's filling my layer mask with black, not my layer. So let's hit OK, and we can see the entire thing becomes invisible. All right, Shift-Delete again, and I'm going to say fill it with white, and our entire layer becomes visible. Okay, so now let's say I painted some areas here on my layer mask, and I want to get a good idea of what I've actually painted. Well, if you hold Alt or Option and click on your layer mask, there we go, it gives you a preview of what your actual layer mask looks like. So Alt or Option, and you can click there again, and it's going to go off and on. Okay, so if you need to see what your layer mask actually looks like, just hold Alt or Option and click on your layer mask. Okay, if you want to select your layer mask, simply hold down Control or Command and click on your layer mask. That's going to turn your layer mask into a selection. So this is the brush stroke that I actually made there. Okay, now if you want to temporarily disable your layer mask, hold down the Shift key and click on your layer mask. You can see it puts a red X there, and it just temporarily disables that. So if you need to see what does this look like complete, well, there we go. Just hit Shift and click back and forth on that. Okay, and the last keyboard shortcut we're going to show you guys is the slash key. It's right above your return key on your keyboard. It looks like it looks like this. It looks like a slash. Okay, so if you're on your layer, just click on that slash key, and this is basically going to give you a quick mask view of what your actual layer mask looks like. Okay, and then to get that away, just click on that slash key again. So these are just basically a few different ways to actually visualize your layer mask. So up until now, we've been using a layer mask to make a circle either visible or invisible. And that's fine if you're just working with circles. But layer masks are really helpful. They go a lot more advanced than that. So now let's go ahead and use a layer mask with a couple selection tools. And we can do this to actually cut our subject out of her background. Okay, to start off with, we're going to make our circle layer invisible. I'm just going to click on this eye, making it invisible real quick. Okay, now we're going to use our magic wand tool. Basically, using the magic wand tool, I can select out this white area here on my subject. And I've chosen this image because it's going to be relatively easy to cut our subject out because she's on a perfectly white background. So let's go ahead and click on our layer. Okay, we're going to use our magic wand tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and click right outside of our subject. And you can see we've selected all of this area. Okay, now we've got a couple more areas to select. So I'm going to hold Shift, and we're going to click here. There we go. And we're going to click right down there as well. Okay, so now all those areas are selected. So now that we have those areas selected, we can turn any active selection into a layer mask. It's really easy to do. Simply click here on your layer mask icon. Okay, and we can see now we have a layer mask. Let's use that keyboard shortcut I told you about earlier, Alt or Option. This is what the layer mask looks like on our image. So you can see all this area is white and this area is black. Now, we know that black makes a layer invisible and white makes a layer visible. Okay, so it makes sense if I hold Alt or Option and click on this, right? It makes sense that our background is visible and our subject is not. Now, if you basically want to flip that, just simply click on your layer mask and hit Control or Command I as an invert, and it's going to invert your layer mask. So you can see, let's hold Alt or Option. I'm going to click here, and now Control or Command I. There we go, and you can just invert that back and forth. Okay, and if you ever can't find anything within Photoshop, make sure to use your help menu. Like I'm going to click on help, and I'm going to type in, there we go, invert. There we go. And just by typing in invert, now I can actually click here and I can see adjustments, invert. So it's gonna actually highlight it. I can click here and it will invert for me. And it's gonna highlight it here in my menu system as well. So if I ever say anything and you're like, oh, I don't remember where that is, just type it into your help menu and it'll actually show up there within Photoshop. Okay, so now that that's inverted, we can see that our subject is cut out of her background. This the checkerboard here in the background lets you know that she is cut out. So she's cut out of her background. Let's create a new layer and I'm going to put it under her. So we're going to start off, I'm going to go to layer, we're going to go to new fill layer, and we're going to go to a solid color. Okay, there we go, and we're going to hit OK. And it's going to ask us what color, and I'm just going to choose a nice bright yellow. We can change this color at any point in time. Okay, now we have our fill adjustment layer, okay, and we have our subject here. I'm going to click here and drag that underneath our subject. There we go. And now we have our background of a completely new color. Now if we want to change the color of a fill layer at any time, simply double click right here on the layer itself, okay? And then you can use your eyedropper to simply hover over different parts of your image and you can choose what background. In this case, I think it's kind of fun to choose backgrounds from our actual image. I'm going to choose this very light yellow. All right, let's hit OK there. All right, now we've seen that layer masks work with regular layers, like here a layer with my subject, but layer masks also work with any adjustment layers or fill layers as well. Okay, so for instance, if I click on the layer mask here for my fill layer and I make a selection right around here, there we go, hit Shift Delete and I can fill that with black, there we go. Now it's completely invisible in that area. I'm just going to do that a couple more times. We're just going to fill a couple of these little holes with black. All right, there we go. I'm using my keyboard shortcuts to just save a little bit of time here. All right, so these are all holes basically. Now if I wanted to create another color behind here, really easy to do. Just create an adjustment layer. We're going to go to solid color, just like we did earlier in our menu system. Okay, now we're going to choose a nice red and we're going to pop that right behind our subject. And our color here, we can simply double click here and we can choose a color from our actual image. All right, let's hit OK. So we can see layer masks are really helpful. In this case, a layer mask is allowing us to cut our subject out of her background. In this case, our layer mask is putting holes in this layer, which is allowing us to see through to the layer underneath it. And there we go. And those are basically filling up the holes. Okay. And on the very top, we have this other circle here that's kind of taking up a little bit more space. And let's say we wanted to kind of use a smaller section of this. Well, we could just use our marquee tool. There we go. Make a selection right around here. And on our layer mask, we can simply hit Control or Command I to invert that. Okay, or we can fill that with white or black. And then we can see now we've got a hole here in our actual layer mask. So we've got some kind of fun there. I'm going to hit Control or Command J to duplicate this, and we'll just make a really simple, like kind of fun graphic on our background. All right, so I'm, again, mostly just like trying to show you guys how to use the layer mask here, but why not create a fun graphic while we're at it? Wow, Aaron, you're so good at creating fun graphics on the fly. Thanks. All right, so there we can see we have a few duplicates of our layer. Each of those has a layer mask, which is making all of the original circles have holes in them. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click on all these layers, shift click on all of them, and hit Control or Command G to group them together so we can click those on or off. Okay, and that's the basic idea with layer masks. So basically, it makes the layer either visible or invisible. You can use it on any layer, and if it is invisible, then basically you're going to see what's underneath that layer. So if you want to cut your subject out of your background, we've got many great free episodes on doing that. You can click on your screen right now and get to some of our episodes on cutting your subject out of the background, and then you can put behind whatever background you'd like in Photoshop. The last thing we're going to show you is how to duplicate your layer masks so you can use the same layer mask on multiple layers, and how to use layer masks in a group. So let's go to our subject here. We have our subject cut out of our background. Now let's say we have a new layer here. I'm just going to, again, we're going to create a new solid color fill layer. All right, we'll just choose like a nice bright pink here. Hit OK. I'm going to place this behind our subject. So we have our subject in the bright pink. Now, let's say I want to use the exact same layer mask that's on my subject. So I have my subject here. Here's our layer mask. Hold Alt or Option to view your layer mask. To duplicate a layer mask from one layer to another, simply hold Alt or Option and then click and drag. So we're going to click here and drag down. We're going to see a double arrow, okay, a little preview of the layer mask, and when I let go, it's going to copy the exact same layer mask from this layer over to this layer, okay? And now I can simply move this layer over to the right, giving me kind of like an interesting type shadow effect. All right, let's go ahead and change our color. We're going to choose this yellow and then maybe just a little bit, there we go. Kind of like echo it out a little bit, just a little bit more fun there. So we're using the exact same layer mask on this layer and on this layer. We just simply moved it out a little bit. And you can use that technique to create things like shadows in Photoshop. Now, we have a couple of layers here on our background. Okay, so we have this layer, okay, which is basically just this yellow background. And then we have our the spots underneath it. So if I wanted to shift click both of those layers and hit Control or Command G to group them together, okay, now we have both of those layers. We can actually use layer masks on groups. So you can use layer mask on individual layers or on adjustment layers or on entire groups. So now that we have our group here, let's go ahead and click on our layer mask icon, okay? And I'm going to hit G. This is for my gradient. So G for the gradient tool, we're going to use a linear gradient, okay? I'm going to use the foreground to transparent. So click on your gradient editor, go to foreground to transparent here, and we're going to paint it with black. So here you see a little preview. It's going to go black to transparent, okay? And I'm going to start here on the right and simply fade to the left. There we go. And now we see our layer mask, or our background, is basically fading from invisible to visible. And then I can create a new solid color adjustment layer behind that, and then we can see, let's just turn this layer off for a second. We can see kind of the idea there. This is fading from invisible here, visible there, and then we have another layer kind of underneath that. And so that's defining the entire group. Now, as you're working in Photoshop, you can always hold Shift, click on your layer mask, and decide, do I like this visible or not visible? Do I want this visible or not visible? You can click on your layer masks at any point in time and enable them and disable them. It makes working with layer masks really easy. All right, guys, and that's basically the entire idea behind layer masks in Photoshop. If you want to use a layer mask, and I highly suggest using them because they're incredibly helpful and I use them in every single image I edit in Photoshop, just follow these key steps. Remember, you can use a layer on any layer, including groups. So to create a layer mask, simply go to Layer, down to Layer Mask, and go to Reveal All. This is going to make a white layer mask, making everything visible. If you want any part of your layer to be invisible, you can simply paint black on it using a brush tool or a clone stamp tool or a marquee tool. You can fill it with colors. You can use the gradient tool. Basically, any way you can get black on your layer mask, that's going to make a certain part of your layer invisible. So remember, white is visible, black is invisible. There are a few keyboard shortcuts that also help when using a layer mask. You can hold the Shift key down and click on your layer mask, which holds a big red X over the layer mask, making it temporarily invisible. So if you want to see what the original layer looks like, just hold Shift, click on and off on that layer mask. If you want to see a preview of what your actual layer mask looks like, hold Alt or Option and click on the layer mask. It's going to give you a black and white preview of that layer mask. And you can turn a layer mask into a selection by holding Control or Command and clicking on that layer mask. The last keyboard shortcut is holding down that slash key right above the return key on your keyboard. It gives you a quick mask preview of what your layer mask actually looks like. To copy a layer mask from one layer to another, hold Alt or Option and click and drag from one layer to another. And to add a layer mask to a group, simply group multiple layers together, click on the layer mask icon right on the bottom of your layers panel, or go to Layer, down to Layer Mask, and to Reveal All. And that's all there is to it, guys. Layer masks are one of the most important things you can use in Photoshop because they're a non-destructive way of making layers invisible, allowing you to do things like cut your subject out of the background, create really nice gradients and fun shapes in Photoshop. If you love Photoshop as much as I do, go ahead and click on your screen right about now. We'll send you free Photoshop and photography episodes every single week. And if you have an idea for an episode or a question, comment about today's episode, just leave it in the comment box right down below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much, guys. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone. All right. Okay. go to layer, down to layer mask, and then to reveal. That's it, guys.